Hi, good evening everyone. Welcome to the webinar, and I hope you can hear me well. And as you can see, we decided to schedule this session because of what happened in CAT 2015 and what happened to the preparation processes or the kind of change you need to make in the preparation processes. There's a lot of questions from a lot of students and readers who want to know exactly what to do for this all important section, right? So we decided to take this session to help you out with a strategy to help you decide or identify how to crack this section, because as you know, the CAT has three sections, 1 hour each of quants, DI and LR, and whatever you do, quants, DI, LR, and of course 1 hour of verbal, and whatever you do, your preparation for CAT is about your ability to reach a score of around 200. And that should be your target. A score of 200 should be your target, because if you are scoring anywhere below that, or at least anywhere below 150, you are not really going to have much of a chance of cracking this exam with a great percentile. So when you're talking about CAT prep, it basically means getting to as close to 200 as possible. Right? So the issue that happens, of course, when you're talking about creating a score of 200 is how do you get a score of maybe 60 to 70. 200 is the benchmark that I set for my students and for my readers and for people who want to ask me about this. But the fact is that even if you get to around 170, 180 out of a total score of 300, currently we have 100 questions in the exam according to the current pattern, and so out of 300, if you score a score of around 170, 180, you would typically end up getting a 99 plus percentile, and 99 plus percentile will typically get you to one of the IIMs, at least based on your profile, if not the top 3 IIMs, at least in the top 6-7 IIMs. So the journey then becomes, okay, how do I get to 60 in each section? And when you talk about getting a score of 60 in each section, so when you're talking about DILR specifically, today's session is not so much about quants and verbal, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. The challenge in DILR is how do you get 60, and then if you're hitting 60, then the challenge becomes how do you go to 80, 90, as close to 100 as possible, 96 as possible in fact, if the paper is easy. But as you all know, for that 1 hour in the exam, you will essentially be only focused on doing data interpretation and logical reasoning. In that context, when we talk about CAT 16, not talking about what happened in CAT 15 or for that matter ignoring what happened in CAT 15 to majority of the aspirants is something that will be foolish if we don't take our lessons from it. So as a lot of you might be knowing, in CAT 2015 the English section was a normal, not exactly a walk in the park, but it was not so inconveniencing or not so difficult to do as you would have in some years. So people had a decent walk in the park kind of an experience, or maybe a slightly less convenient experience than a walk in the park, but definitely not a very discomfort situation in the language section. So at the end of 1 hour, when they moved into DI and LR, they got, a lot of people got a shock of their lives, because the quality and the depth of the questions was something that they had not expected, and something that they had not come across in previous papers, or maybe also not in a lot of the mock tests. And in fact, from my experience, I can tell you that a lot of people actually gave up on their exam midway through the DILR section, because when you enter the exam, you have a thought process. Okay, I need to score maybe 40 at least in this section, 40 or 50, or whatever your score target is, and when you're talking about getting that score, and then you start solving the paper, and in the middle of the paper you realize that instead of 22 attempts, you're only ending up at 15 attempts. It's very difficult for you to see in the exam that, okay, this is not happening only to me, it's happening to everyone. So actually the fact was that this experience was happening to everyone across the country, but individuals solving the paper for themselves, since they do not know what is happening across the country to other people, started feeling that their section is going bad, and because the target of 20 attempts or 22 attempts had come down to a 14-13 attempt situation, which later on in hindsight people realized that even 13-14 attempts in last year's exam was pretty good. So what that led to is a lot of people by the end of the DILR section had given up on CAT 15. So when they entered the quant, the negative effect of the DILR lingered on, and they did not do what they had to do there. A lot of people had actually given up and started thinking about, okay, I need to take it this next year, etc. And that led to underperformance in the quants part also. So I'm going to discuss this issue because I guess all of you are here, and it's a wonderful experience to be talking to a lot of you guys who are obviously sitting across the country. Some of you are outside this country also, and discussing this. So the key question that we need to ask ourselves, and as a trainer or as a coach or as an author that I try to answer for people, is what does it mean for preparation? I mean, what happened in CAT 16, and what does it mean for preparation? So what does tough DI mean? What does tough LR mean? Does it mean that there was some logic that could have never been visualized by someone? And when I raise that question, you obviously know the answer is no. And you'll realize that why DILR is important, and unfortunately what happens is one of the problems with DILR for a lot of students and a lot of you is that when you are practicing during your practice processes, what you do is you have this daily target of, okay, doing quants and doing verbal and doing English, but DI and LR get swept under the carpet. I meet so many aspirants on a daily, on a weekly basis. I ask them, what are you doing for quants? They're very happily telling me about ki aaj ye kiya, this is what I did today, and this is what I did yesterday, and this is what is my plan for the next week. And then I ask them about verbal, and they have got a very concrete, clear plan. And when they ask about the DI and LR, most people start rolling their eyes and don't know what to do. In fact, if I ask this question to you now, and you can respond on the chat, what is your concrete plan for DILR last week? Right, and you will realize that if I give you this question in maths, you would have if you're preparing for CAT this year, in quants you would have had a clear idea, okay, this week I am doing this chapter, or this week I am doing these 200 questions from this book or this study material. But if I ask you, what is the concrete plan? What was the plan that you were executing for DILR over the last 7 days? Today is 25th August. So between 18th August to 25th August, how did you change your DILR skills? And if you did not have any concrete plans, and hence you did not execute any of these concrete plans which you never had, how do you expect? So if your DILR skills on 18th August and a DILR skills on 25th August, if both skills are same, then how will it be different on 2nd September? And then if it's not different on 2nd September, then how is it different on 9th September? So to understand what you need to do, so yeah, some people are coming up with solve all the basic questions of LR, get acquainted with different LR questions. This was the plan, solve your modules in your book. I would say that, okay, at least if you're doing that on a regular basis, you're at least on some path. But is that the path the most optimal? Is something that is again something that you do not really you can not really vouch for, right? So I'll be dividing the next part of the next thing I want to talk to you about is essentially what you see in this slide is what could be a 3-month plan for you. And this question comes from Piyush, that CAT question, but CAT questions are of a different level only. And you are solving basic questions and CAT questions are different level. And that's what I try to tell people. CAT does not give you any logic which you have not seen. In fact, if you ask me this question, CAT 2015, was it something that was questions that had logic which nobody could have seen or nobody could have predicted? I'll give you my own personal example. I did not find a single question inside the CAT which had something new. Yes, the twists were more, the dimensions in the questions were more, but it had nothing more than what you could have seen in the DI or the LR questions available outside. There was nothing, no new logic. There is no logic like you collected 4 stones together and you built a rocket. And how did the rocket get built? There was no logic like that. And there was no rocket science in the paper. And to prove that to you, what I'll do now, so we are trying to talk about a 3-month plan for developing your DI skills. Where week by week your DI should improve. So I guess you all know this, and you can also extrapolate what I'm going to talk to you about DI into LR also, because say maybe a couple of things will change, but more or less DI and LR will broadly remain the same. So what you need to understand is, okay, if I ask people about this question, as somebody pointed out here, when I asked this question, what was the plan last week? The typical answer was that the plan was to solve questions, right? Now, fine, there's nothing wrong with that plan per se, and I hope you can see my screen now. What you need to understand, the first major point about DI and LR that you need to understand is that it is not a theory oriented subject. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? To give you an example, if I ask you this question, that I want to study physics, you will be able to give me a list of books which will be spanning maybe starting from class 7th to a PhD in physics. I can actually read books on physics and read chapters on physics for 10 years before I can say that I know physics, right? So that's a subject which is extremely theory oriented. There's so much theory around that you can actually study theory for 5, 7, 10 years before you start applying it. But instead of that, if I tell you that I want to learn driving, if I tell you that I want to learn driving, what should I do? What theory should I study? Is there any theory to study in driving? Obviously not. There are some principles, but those principles can be communicated in 15-20 minutes. And after that, how do you learn driving? And how do you improve your driving? It's very different from how you improve your physics, right? So when you realize that DI and LR are not theory-oriented subjects, you then realize, then what are they? They are experientially learnt topics. The experientially learnt topics. Both DI and LR are experientially learnt, and hence the quality of your learning experience will depend on the quality of your learning extraction, which will happen when you enter the questions. So there are two aspects to your plan. There will be two aspects to your plan, and as someone said, you're all ears, as I know. So there are two aspects to your plan when you talk about developing your data interpretation or your logical reasoning ability. One aspect of the plan will be the quantity of what I need to do. What is the quantity of questions that I need to process? Is it 50? Is it 100? I'm talking about, when I say questions in DI and LR, I'm talking about sets. So every question will contain between 3 to 5, every set will contain between 3 to 5 questions. So is 50 sets good? Is 100 sets good? Is 150 sets good? What is that number at which one should feel comfortable ki, okay, I have experienced quite a bit of DI. Right? So what do you think would be your number? What comes to your mind if I ask you this question? So Harshit says at least 100. Anybody else? Akash says it depends on difficulty and the time we take to do it, but still, even if you solve very difficult questions, is 50 questions enough? No, please distinguish between the time you take to solve the questions and the learning you're extracting in the questions. So the first answer that comes to me for in this context, the first answer that gives me a feeling of security is the 300-400 that Abhishek is talking about. So when you're talking about DI or LR, it's a race. When you're talking about quantity, it's a race to getting to as close to 300 to 400 sets of solving. So, and of course, when I say 300 to 400 sets, you will need to make sure that once you do the first 50, so this is part of your plan then. So first 50 to 100, you will do you'll do the basic questions, you'll do the questions that will warm you up into DILR, you'll start giving you what to expect in DILR, it will give you the coordinates of it, but that's more of the warm-up sets. So what will happen is in the first 50 to 100 sets, you will come across various situations which will then start becoming repetitive. The situation will then start becoming repetitive after some time. So this becomes your first aspect. Okay, first 50 to 100, you'll just go with the flow, whatever questions come in front of you, whether you're doing my book, you're doing your tests, mock tests, or you're doing some study material, you'll just make sure that, okay, let me just go through the experience of the first 50-100 sets. And then you'll say that, okay, after this first 50-100 count, you'll start picking up sets, and you'll start selecting which sets to pick up to do the remaining 300. So if you're talking about, if you're in agreement on this number, 300 to 400 sets of solving is a decent number to get to, and given the fact that if you're talking about 3-month plan, it will leave you with 12 to 14 weeks, and 12 to 14 weeks, that will give you a weekly plan of around 25, maybe 20 to 25 sets per week. So that becomes your quantity. But then it's not just about quantity. If you just do 300 sets without learning from it, you're not going to get through, or you're not going to develop your DI skills or your LR skills. So the second aspect of this is, what is the quality of learning extraction from the sets. So to ensure the quality of learning extraction, you'll have to do two things. A, what you'll have to do is you'll have to ensure that the quality of the sets that you pick up are diverse, give you a gamut of experiences rather than being unidimensional. So if you see 10 sets consecutively just talking about percentage increase and percentage decrease, you will not count them as 10 sets. So the first thing you'll have to do is you'll have to select the quality of questions that you want to do, right? And the second thing you'll have to do, apart from to improve the quality of learning extraction, is actually exactly the same words. How do you extract learning from the set? That becomes your second challenge. So I have planned, rather than making this an abstract session, what I decided was, when we talk about tough DI, this question that comes in your screen is one of the toughest DI sets that has ever been asked. And what I want to show you through this set is that even something like this is eminently doable. So I'm just looking through your comments now before I come back to this set. So you have asked me, the question will come back. So you're selecting questions at random or going through a market book set by set. Yeah, even if you're going through the market book, random selection of questions you should not do. You should take a resource, but in that resource be selective about which book you want, which questions you want to actually invest time in extracting learning. Some questions you'll just do for the sake of doing it and improving your skills of speed, etc. But learning extraction means that you extract situations or you extract things from questions by identifying the situations that the questions are throwing up. So can you all see the question now? This question is reputedly one of the toughest questions ever in the CAT. And all I want to show you is that this will get solved in 6 steps, which any school student should be able to do. Right? So Shubham, please ask me that question again later. Are you able to see this question here? So I'm going ahead with the discussion of this question to show you the process of learning extraction. Right? The Erdos number question you can all see. So I'm coming back to this. So what happens in a question of DI or LR is that there are some normal reactions that everybody will be able to take. So for example, in this question, when you read the first set, when you read the first set, the first statement, the statement talks about mathematicians are assigned a number called Erdos number, named after famous mathematician Paul Erdos. Now, anybody's reaction to this will be the same, right? There's nothing in this statement to worry about, right? And there's nothing to be extracted from this statement. And obviously, this is the start of the question, so they're just building up the question from this point. Only Paul Erdos himself has an Erdos number of 0. So what you start putting in terms of your reactions with that statement is Erdos had an Erdos number of 0. Now often I tell people, and you will also realize this, that when I'm showing you this question, you'll start realizing that this was actually a very simple question to do. Yet on the other hand, there's this dichotomy that this question is expected or called as one of the toughest questions ever in the CAT. As I said, I'm going to show it to you in 6 steps that any school kid should be able to do. So what I want to explain to you is how this dichotomy happens, right? And we will keep going statement by statement, and please make sure that what I'm showing you here right now is not something that is only to show you. Even when you solve a DI or LR question, you should be focused on on a sentence, and you should use the sentence, or you should analyze the sentence as long as you want. So any mathematician who has written a research paper with ERDOS has an ERDOS number of 1. Now, I often tell people that if you improve the quality of your reading, automatically data interpretation LR questions, even your quants question, depend completely on how well you read the question. You improve the quality of your reading, you will have all the triggers inside the question to tell you how to solve it. So any mathematician who has written a research paper with ERDOS has an ERDOS number of 0 or of 1. So we can just keep this in our mind for the time being. And then they give you, for other mathematicians, the ERDOS calculation of his ERDOS number is illustrated below. So we need to read this part then. And if you go through a peripheral vision of this, I'll just show this to you at the end now. You are just so many sentences away from completing the analysis of this question, because after that you have the 5 questions coming up. So if you can analyze these remaining sentences and react. So till now obviously there is no reaction difference between what you would do and what 100 percentile would do. So we come across this question, this statement, that suppose, so we are trying to talk about how is so somebody who writes a paper with ERDOS, his ERDOS number is 1. And now we are trying to think, okay, suppose that a mathematician X has co-authored papers with several other mathematicians. From among them, mathematician Y has the smallest ERDOS number. Let the ERDOS number of Y be Y. Then X has an ERDOS number of Y plus 1. Now this is actionable information. This is the trigger inside the problem which is asking you to think in a certain way. And before you move on, you need to explain it to yourself, what has this just said? So if you go back to your rough sheet, your worksheet, you will say that, okay, if there's a mathematician X and his co-authors are, let's say, somebody with an ERDOS number of 4, 7, 3, 8, 11 and let's say 5. If these are the co-authors for X, then X's ERDOS number will depend on the value of 3. His ERDOS number will depend on this number, and X's ERDOS number will obviously then become 3 plus 1 equals 4. So if X co-authors, so you can also work out that if X co-authors another paper further with somebody who has an ERDOS number of 10, it will not change his ERDOS number, because his ERDOS number is still derived from this value of 3. The moment somebody with an ERDOS number less than 3, let's say suppose he co-authors with somebody who has an ERDOS number of 2, enters this list, then the value of X's ERDOS number will change from 3 plus 1 to 2 plus 1. But till that does not happen, his ERDOS number will be still 4, till that has not happened. So this is the deduction that should come out of your reading of this. So all fine till here for everyone? Right? So let's move on. I was just taking an example as 3. Why 3 would be considered? Because of what this is saying. Read this statement. From among them, mathematician Y has the smallest ERDOS number from the co-authors of X. So if these are the co-authors of X and 3 is the smallest ERDOS number, the ERDOS number of X will be 4. This logic, as you can make out, is quite similar to what a LinkedIn logic is. So it showed me, for example, on a hilarious note, once I was just browsing through my LinkedIn profile and I saw that I was 3 links away from Barack Obama. So obviously somebody who knew about Barack Obama and his friend was my friend. So 2 links away from Barack Obama I had a friend, and LinkedIn showed me 3 links away from Barack Obama. That's how simple it is. So it's the same logic here, right? So you realize that this is the logic. So we move on. Hence, any mathematician with no co-authorship chain connected to RDOS has an RDOS number of infinity. We can make sense of that. Now the data starts coming. This was, till this point, this was just talking about the basic situation of the problem. Now the data starts coming. Let's read this statement by statement. In a 7-day long mini conference organized in memory of Paul RDOS, a close group of 8 mathematicians called them A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H discussed some research problems. So the reaction to this statement is that we'll say that okay, we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G and H. These are the 8 guys who were there for that conference. At the beginning of the conference, now we keep reading statement by statement. Every time there's a trigger in a statement that is asking us to do something, we'll do that in the list. At the beginning of the conference, A was the only participant who had an RDOS number of infinity. So at the beginning of the conference, maybe I'll put this in a table then. A had an infinity RDOS number. So this is at the start of the conference, and A was the only participant with an RDOS number of infinity. That means the other people had some RDOS number, and they had, of course I missed this statement, they tell us that any mathematician with no co-authorship chain connected to RDOS has an RDOS number of infinity. That means A is not connected to RDOS through any chain, right? And then it says nobody had an RDOS number less than F. So what does this mean? People misinterpret this as that F was minimum, F was the minimum. But why I call this a misinterpretation is because in this situation you cannot say that F was the minimum, but what this means is that F was one of the minimums. He could be the minimum, but this statement is just guaranteeing to us that he was one of the minimums. So if you interpret at this point that F was the minimum, it is the wrong interpretation. Nobody had an RDOS number less than F does not mean that F is the unique minimum. If I am at 2 and you also at 2, I can say that nobody is below me. And if you are both at the lowest, but I cannot say that I am the absolute minimum, the single minimum, the minimum. I can say I am a minimum. Of course, as we'll see later, this did not affect the matter much. So if we define the RDOS number of F as F based on this, and we put a remark there, he is one of the minimums at this point, we are ready to go ahead from this statement. The problem then says, on the 3rd day of the conference, F co-authored a paper jointly with A and C, and this is where the meat of the problem is. F jointly co-authored a paper jointly with A and C. So when he'll do that, when F will co-author a paper with A and C, A's value will definitely become F plus 1, because A had no connection to anybody else, and now A has a connection to F, so A's value will definitely become F plus 1. But what about C? So the thinking at this point for C should be that C could have been at F and remains at F. One possibility. If C's Erdos number had been F itself, then his Erdos number will remain at F because co-authoring with F will not change it. Or if his Erdos number was F plus 1, that means he already has a co-author with an Erdos number of F. So the second scenario for C could be that F plus 1 remains F plus 1. And the third scenario is that he is at F plus 1 plus, which means that his value would have gone from F plus 2 or F plus 3 or F plus 4 to F plus 1. So you have three scenarios in this situation. Which of these is fitting in, we don't know, but you should be able to see the three scenarios at this situation. Does that make sense to all of you? Make sense? F plus 1 or starting at F, remaining at F, starting at F plus 1 and remaining at F plus 1, or starting at more than F plus 1 and coming down to F plus 1. Right? Now what does this do? Now let's move on. This reduced the average Erdos number of the group of 8 mathematicians to 3. So you realize that, okay, whatever it did, now what you realize at this point is that C's Erdos number is F or F plus 1. Because in scenario 1, his Erdos number was F and remained at F. Scenario 2, his Erdos number was F plus 1, remains at F plus 1. And either scenario 2 or 3, you can see clearly that his Erdos number is fixed at F plus 1. So you realize that his Erdos number is either at F or F plus 1. But what you also know, and of course F's Erdos number will remain F with this, and what you also know at this point is that after day 3, because this was on the third day, after the day 3, the total let me just expand this a little bit. After day 3, the total is, since the average of 8 people has come down to 24, so after day 3, the total Erdos number is 24. Does that make sense? That's the reaction to this statement. This reduced the average Erdos number of the group of 8 to 3. The Erdos numbers of B, D, E, G, H remained unchanged with the writing of this paper. So B, D, E, G, H remained unchanged. So what we'll say is let B be B, D be D, E will be E, G and H will be G and H respectively, and they will remain unchanged. So B will remain B, D will remain D, E will remain E, G will remain G, and H will remain H. That's the reaction to this statement. Now we still have to resolve whether C is F or F plus 1. And then this is the turning point in the question, this statement, which says that further, no other co-authorship amongst any 3 members would have reduced the average Erdos number of the group to as low as 3. How do you react to this statement? No other co-authorship among any 3 members would have reduced the average Erdos number of the group to as low as 3. To me, this means that C was the second highest Erdos number to start with. Why? Because if C was not the second highest, let's say if C was F, a scenario where C was F and let's say B was F plus 4, then if I co-authored between A, B and F rather than A, C and F, I'll have a further reduction of my ADOS number, total 24, which means the average was 3, the total 24. In a scenario like this, if B was higher than C to start with, and even if C was F plus 1 and B was F plus 4, or even if C was F plus 1 and B was F plus 1 also, then in that case I can replace B with C and I'll still get this 24. But the problem is saying that no other co-authorship chain, no other co-authorship amongst any 3 members would have reduced the average ADOS number of the group of 8 to as low as 3. So in my view, this is the only critical point at which you need a analysis and you need to decide that okay, that means that if I replace C by anybody else, the ADOS number, this total ADOS number of 24 will not come down to as low as this, which means that C must be the second highest. A is anyway infinity, and you realize that the C is the second highest value, which means that you can then make out okay, then C must be more than F plus 1 and his value must be reducing to F plus 1. And now you are down to the last 4 sentences, and at the end of this you will get your answers. At the end of the 3rd day, now this is the next critical element. At the end of the 3rd day, 5 members of this group had identical ADOS numbers, while the other 3 had ADOS numbers distinct from each other. So you are in a situation where you want 5 people to have the same value and 3 more people to have different values. I'm representing these as the 8 people. And we are already at a situation where 2 people are at F plus 1. So if 2 people are at F plus 1, obviously each of these 5 must be F plus 1. So that means you have 5 people at F plus 1. One person we know, F himself, is at F, and the remaining 2 people should be what? You cannot put anybody at F, because if you put anybody at F, you will have 2 people at F. You cannot put anybody else at F plus 1, because if you put another person at F plus 1, you will have 6 people at F plus 1, which means that there must be 2 people at F plus 2 and more than that. So you can have an F plus 2 and F plus 3, or an F plus 2 and F plus 4, and so on. And you also have this constraint that there's 24 as the total. So that gives you the equation and the reaction. All these are reactive to what we just read. That 5 times F plus 1 plus F plus 2 numbers which are different from each other. So let's call them X and Y. This is adding up to 24. And when you put that, you will realize that you are getting 6F plus 5 plus X plus Y equals 24. Now obviously when and X and Y are obviously more than F. So if you try to put a value of F as 3 for instance, you realize that you can't fit it in. You cannot fit it in. Because if F is put as 3, 6 3 is 18 plus 5 23, and you need X and Y to be more than 3, it won't fit in. If you put F as 2, you will get 6F as 12 plus 5 as 17, and that will give X plus Y as 7. But if you put F as 2, that means the 5 F plus 1s are 3 each, and if the 5f plus 1, if we put f as 2 and the 5f plus 1s are 3 each, then x will have to be at least f plus 2, that means at least 4, and y will also have to be more than that, so y will have to be at least 5 then, or it could also be reversed. That could be x could be at least, if you put y at least 4, then x will be at least 5. But whatever you do with x and y in this situation, you cannot make 7, which means you reject the value of f as 2 also. And since Erdos is already dead, they told you that it was in memory of Paul Erdos. It means that f has to be 1. So you come back to this table now and you say that okay, at the end of day 3, you have this guy at 2, this guy at 2, this guy at 1, and you have to put 3 more 2s, and that will give you a total of 11, and which will then give you that x plus y. So you have to put 3 more 2s, and you have to put an x and a y to add up to 24, which means that x plus y should be 13, which will give you scenarios that x can be, with 1 2, x can be 3 10, it could be 4 9, it could be 5 8, it could be 6 7, and 7 6 will be the same as 6 7 because we are not particularly using x and y as ordered pairs, right? So we realize that okay, we have this reaction, and then they give you the next statement which says that on the 5th day E co-authored a paper with F which reduced the group's average Erdos number by 0.5. So if you read this, what does it mean? If the group's average Erdos number increased by 5, reduced by 0.5, that means, this means that the total dropped by 4. And we also know that since F had an Erdos number of 1, E's Erdos number will become 2. And if E's Erdos number has become 2, and it says that with this the Erdos number of the remaining 6 were unchanged, that means if E's Erdos number has become 2 and E's Erdos number is the only Erdos number has changed, this total dropping by 4 would only happen if E has dropped from 6 to 2, which means that E's Erdos number right from the start was 6, and on day 5, 5th day, on day 5, E's Erdos number has dropped to 2. You have A and C also at 2. You have F at 1. And since X is 6 to start with, Y will be 7, because if you look at these possibilities, the first 3 possibilities get rejected. X and Y must be 6 and 7 there. And once you realize that, you then realize that this means that we need to fit in 3 more 2's in this picture. 3 more 2's in this picture, and Y must be 7, and one 7 in this picture. And you have B free, D free, F free, and G and H both free. Right? So you have to put these 3 2's and 1 7, for which we don't have information with respect to whom it goes to. And the problem ends with there is no other paper written in the conference. So the question, now let's look at the questions. The person having the largest Erdos number at the end of the conference must have had a Erdos number of 7. How many participants in the conference did not change their Erdos number? So we need to trace this. Who all did not change? So for that you can think of who changed. So you realize that A did change it. A changed it. B has not changed his Erdos number. C has changed his Erdos number. and D has changed his RDOS number. So 3 people have changed their RDOS numbers and 5 people have not. The RDOS number of C at the end of the conference, we have worked it out that C's RDOS number is 2. The RDOS number of E at the beginning of the conference, we have worked it out that E's RDOS number at the beginning of the conference must be 6. And how many participants had the same RDOS number at the beginning of the conference? So you realize that one guy was 6, one guy was 7, one guy was 1, a fourth guy was infinity, a fifth guy was more than F plus 1. And after A and C changed their RDOS number, 5 people had the same RDOS number. So there must have been 3 people who had the same RDOS number at the start. So if you come back now, it is time consuming, definitely, right? But I'm talking about in a 20-year framework of the CAT, this turns out to be one of the toughest questions. Last year's questions, none of the questions was as tough as this, right? And please understand, what are you playing for? When you do a DILR session, you're playing for 20 marks, 5 questions. If you're playing for 5 questions, the current context you're playing for 15 marks, right? And how many steps did we do? If you count back, the first step you did was build that table. The second step you did the main step. There are just three major steps in this problem. First major step was identifying what is happening to C. Second major step was identifying the value of F. And the third major step was identifying what's happening to E. Shift from 6 to 2. Right? And if you are talking about a situation like this, please understand one very, very fundamental issue, that if you are prepared well, right? Now see, it's going to be a competitive situation. If it's going to take time for you, it's going to take time for everyone else. But if you go back to the steps, it was just reading it once. Was there any step in this process, in this whole question, where we did something that a normal school student will not be able to do? You answer me that there. Any step in this question where we used rocket science? Right? So what does tough DI mean? What does tough LR mean? Just reading properly. And which of those steps was something that you can't do yourself? Everything the problem is telling you to do. And that's what is the key in every DI question and every LR question. The problem will tell you what to do. There will be triggers inside the problem. And what you have to do is, if you are doing something for the first time, if you see a trigger for the first time, if you get stuck in it for the first time, what should I do with this? You don't understand, it's fine. But if you see the same trigger again and again across questions, and then you work out, okay, for this situation, I'll always do this. This question, which people are not able to decode, all I helped you was read properly. If you read properly, you'll automatically get the answers. And time does not become an issue, because ultimately if you're talking about, let's say, a 4-question set and you're targeting a score of 50, you just have to get through 4 sets, 12 marks per set. So why I showed you this question rather than doing this as a generic, we'll come to that, how to improve reading. We'll just come to that as I come to the end of my session. Just 2-3 things I want to wind up with. The first thing, why I went into a question rather than doing a generic webinar, was because I wanted to show you, I told you there are 2 aspects to this. Quality of the quantity of what you do. Please ensure you do your quantity of 300, 400 sets. The more the merrier. If you can go to 500, it's great. But 300 is an absolute minimum. If somebody tells me, sir, I've done 150 questions, I would not be very confident about his chances unless his learning quality is very strong. So that's one. You have to ensure quantity, and two is ensure quality of extraction. So what did you learn from this question? You learned that there were certain specific points in this question which had specific clues out of which you had to react in a certain way. So as you do your 300 sets, what will happen is you will start getting repetitive clues. And believe me, once you have done your 300 sets, you will stop finding new situations. If you have not solved a set just for the sake of solving and getting to the answer, but rather you have solved them to extract the information from it, to extract the entire juice of the learning possible. Right? So how do you improve the quality of extraction? Is what I showed you. You have to do sentence by sentence analysis. And you will automatically start realizing when you do your first 50-70 sets as a warm-up, every set will contain something new or the other. But after you do the first 50-70 sets, you'll start getting to see a sameness in the DILR. And when you start seeing a sameness, and as you keep then start trying to look for new kinds of sets, in my book you have a complete section in the DI book called Challenges in DI. In the LR book we have put a lot of tough questions this year in the new editions. You can actually have a look at that. And so as I always say, that for the well-prepared aspirant, there will be no logic surprises for you at all. And the idea should be that you try to maximize your DILR score rather than take that section on. Don't sweep it under the carpet. But as I started the webinar with, there's a tendency to actually sweep questions under the carpet, which you should not do. So if you avoid these three things, then you focus on extraction of quality of learning. And as I said, what I did in that question set was just creating sentence by sentence reactions. So after 300 sets, you will suddenly start realizing that there's nothing left to do. So strategy for preparation is simple. When you want to learn driving, you sit behind the car and you start driving. You make a few mistakes, but then by the end of it you start learning. Similarly, DILR is experiential. The experience of problem solving is what will keep getting better, but it's not just solving for the sake of solving. It's about solving it in the context or of the extraction of what you are doing. In CAT, how much time should a particular set consume? If you are targeting, it depends on how much you are targeting. So if you are targeting 6 sets to solve, 3 in DI, 3 in LR, you have 10 minutes per set, which is quite enough to react to. Last year, why it was difficult? So as I said, there was nothing new in any set that I saw in the CAT last year. Why it became difficult was not because of the newness of the set, but because there were lengthy questions. So automatically, if the questions are lengthy, it will not be lengthy only for you. It will be lengthy for everyone. Right? And of course, that is an important question that Nishant is saying. When can we decide that we leave a particular set? So please understand this. When you are doing a quants question, if you leave a question after 45 seconds, around 45 seconds, you are perfectly fine. But in a DI question, because there will be 4 questions at least in the set, 45 into 4, that means 180 seconds, 3 minutes, you can take a decision, okay, I am not doing this question. Right? So automatically what will happen is, how do you improve speed? Focus on 2-3 things. One is, you will start seeing what the kind of calculations you have to do. Make sure that you improve your calculation speeds, A. And second, try to do DI and LR in one reading. Don't try to, what I see a lot of people doing is that they go back and forth, reading the same thing over and over again. Don't do that. Instead, what you focus on is one reading. So if you look through what I did, the way I solved it, what I did was one reading. Whatever I had to take from a statement, I took it. I spent a little bit more time on a sentence rather than reading it. And that's one of the traps you'll need to avoid. What I see is people try to speed up in trying to read faster and in that context they create accidents in terms of their reactions to specific points in the problem, right? So just to wind up, I hope you enjoyed this thing, and it gave you this a brief idea of what 3 to 4 sets, 3 sets in DI, 3 sets in LR. 6 will make you among the top 0.2, 0.3 percentile. Even if you crack 4 or 5, that's great. So as you start doing the same thing over and over again, you will start improving, and that's the strategy, Suryateja. The strategy is that you delve into the questions and extract as much learning as possible, right? Thanks a lot. I hope you all enjoyed this, and it was a pleasure to be interacting with all of you, and I hope this will help you create a difference in what you're going to do in the next 3 months. And see you guys soon again with a similar webinar. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.